Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are tuning to around the world. My name is Santokie. I'm one half of the Caribbean Cricket Podcast. Now, for eagle-eyed viewers, they may notice that I'm not the usual person who does the introduction. Usually, Michelle does the co-hosting introduction. I've got a bit of imposter syndrome here, but I'm trying my best. And with me as ever, I don't know if we can call him a guest at this point. You know, he's become such a long-time guest on the show, part of the show. Big wrestling fan as well. We joked beforehand, this is like when Crush done the Freebird rule and tagged in for demolition whenever one of them couldn't make it. So, pleasure as always to have Bharat Sundaresan. Bharat, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. The analogy I thought of, wrestling one that is, because you spoke of tag teams, I don't know how many people remember this, even if they watched the Attitude Era of WWE very closely. Let's see. There was one Raw where, like, this is when Vince is at his heel best and he's trying to make life hell for Austin. And Austin's up against Kane and The Undertaker. And Austin just can't find a tag team partner. They don't know who to go. I mean, I think The Rock's not there. Nobody's there. And really randomly, out of the blue, Billy Gunn comes out. Do you remember this, Mike?
Yeah.
Like when Billy Gunn and Steve Austin take on Undertaker and Kane. So that's who I feel like. I feel like bad as Billy Gunn. I think I feel like bad as Billy Gunn most days, but especially today. I just feel like you didn't expect. I mean,
No,
this also
I
makes
wasn't.
you Austin, by the way. Like, yeah, so
I'll take that.
so there you go.
As you were mentioning that obscure wrestling reference, I could hear the collective groans of fans who don't watch wrestling. And I'm thinking, oh no, another 10 minutes where Barat talking about wrestling before we get into the cricket.
I've seen that in the comments. Like the last time I was there, I think we spoke about WrestleMania for a long time and just general wrestling. I think people, as soon as they see that, oh, today the co-host is Bharat Sundaresan, they'll just like fast forward to 20 minutes anyway. But hey, if they are going to do that anyway, it gives us an excuse to talk more wrestling, right?
Exactly. Well, let's get on to the main thing. I haven't even introduced what we're doing in the show. People are probably tuning in thinking, wait, is it just Santokie and Barat talking about 90s WWF for 30 minutes? So we're here to look at, the IPL has started this weekend. We're here to look specifically at West Indian players signed for the IPL, some of the performances we've seen, and sort of what this means in the context of a World Cup. Now, Barat, at this point, 2024, the IPL is such a staple of the cricketing calendar. Teams don't play international matches during this sort of window, unless you're poor Bangladesh or Sri Lanka playing Test cricket at the moment. In 2024, could there be an argument to say an IPL is bigger than an actual T20 World Cup?
I think, look, you'll find hardliners who will be ashamed to admit it, or they'll feel really hard done by when you do even bring up that comparison. But the fact is, it just is, right? Like you go back to the last few T20 World Cups, and I've covered, I think, all of them. I've been at the venue or I've covered it off TV, regardless, during those two T20 World Cups in COVID era anyway. The interest starts developing more as you reach the knockout stages. And in the last few seasons, it's been the semifinals and the finals. I mean, there'll be that India-Pakistan match. Like, take 2022, for example. I was there at the MCG when India and Pakistan played that famous match. And there was crazy excitement. But on either side of it, during the league stages, there were matches, there were close matches, but nobody really got really pumped about it till you got into the semifinals, and India and England qualified for the Adelaide one, and I think New Zealand played the other one. I think there you go. It's one of those, right? But I'm not saying the IPL is a better tournament or has more value, but the build up to the IPL. I mean, I saw comments on social media and just generally the excitement around the beginning of the IPL is, back in the day, it was mainly centered around India, but now around world cricket, everybody's tuning in. and there's more access to the IPL as well. So, and also another thing that has changed, and you can draw some parallels with wrestling here, like you always can with everything in life, is how much more active all these franchises have become with social media, haven't they? Like, they start putting out these clips like a few weeks out from the IPL. Like from an Australian perspective, just watching Justin Langer, who the last time he was coach, he parted ways with Australia in very unsavory or on unsavory terms, and to see him kind of reinvent himself the way he has with Lucknow, his first ever IPL gig, that kind of also adds into it with the T20 World Cup. Also, because you have that first round where it's like a qualifying tournament. It's you don't have the big teams in it generally, though the West Indies were there in Hobart 2 years ago, and as we all know how that ended up. It just kind of it's a slow build, but I think the excitement really kicks in once you get close to maybe the last round of league matches, where you're like, oh, if this team wins, they go into the semi-final, and then you're kind of thinking of pair matchups in the knockouts. But otherwise, it takes a while. Unlike the IPL, where you're right into it, and yeah, I mean, everybody's there. Like all the big name players are there. It's difficult to keep track on who they're playing for, but they're all there. And even in terms of, say, broadcast, right? Like all the big name commentators you think of are there. And there's always, it has taken over, and it's not just now. I think in the last 5-7 years, the IPL has become like the go-to in that sense.
Yeah, I think you make a really good point about the social media presence, especially cricket. A lot of times cricket seems like it's lagging behind other sports, especially if you compare it to like basketball or football. But it really feels like franchises, they're almost trying to give gimmicks to their players and make the players big stars. It gives like main event aura to that. Oh, but talking of the semi-finals, one team who desperately be hoping to make the semi-finals of the World Cup, West Indies, hosting that World Cup, T20 World Cup in June. It's been an unusual time for West Indies cricket, because on the one hand, we didn't qualify for the ODI World Cup. On the other hand, in T20s, we won an away series against South Africa, beat England, lost 2-1 to Australia, but against Australia, you sort of take that some strong performances there. And Darren Sammy's recently come out and said, generally, he's got an idea, 90% of the squad, there's 2 or 3 spaces up for grabs. And so you'd imagine with the only T20 cricket going on really before that World Cup being the IPL, Sammy's going to be watching the IPL very closely to see who can fill those spots, which leads us to our first player, Barat, a good friend of yours, someone who'll be hoping to take one of these 2 mystery spots, Shamar Joseph. Now, Shamar Joseph is at Lucknow Super Giants. Firstly, Barat, I mean, off the top of my head, I can't think of an overseas player signed by the IPL who's only played a collective of 2 T20s in his professional career. It's unheard of, and does that sort of reflect, ironically, the legacy of Test cricket, like how important kind of Test cricket is, the fact that he's managed to get a relatively big money deal, $350,000 US dollar deal. Does that sort of weirdly highlight the strength of Test cricket even in the modern era?
Strength of Test cricket, timing. Timing is everything, right? Like, say if Shamar Joseph had pulled out this that performance at the Gabba in, I don't know, November, right? Like, would it have had the same impact? I'm not sure. Yeah, I mean, yes, it could have, because the auction would have happened just a month or so after that. But you're right. I mean, you're talking about a kid who, played a bit of CPL cricket, had an okay CPL beginning, but then his main real claim to fame has been in those 2 Test matches that you mentioned. And especially that, like, once in a lifetime kind of spell that he pulled off at the Gabba. And literally from that point on, like, or even before then, like even in Adelaide, when he got rid of Steve Smith with his first ball and got another wicket that evening, among the first 3 questions to him, at least 2 of them were about, oh, what are you going to do when the IPL comes for you? And, this is before he produced that performance at the Gabba. And people hadn't really spoken of him as a T20 bowler, or we didn't know whether he's good or bad at T20. We still don't know. I don't know whether the IPL franchise that's bought him, Lucknow, knows how good he is in T20 cricket. But you just saw the raw talent, and you were like, well, yeah, we need to tap into that potential. And that's why he was picked when they had an injury there. And, well, yeah, he he didn't get a chance yesterday to prove his credentials. He's been doing well on social media. We spoke about those clips that Lucknow have been putting out. He seems to be a natural, and we saw that he's a performer, right? Even when he wasn't taking wickets, or when he was taking wickets, the big smile and the bow to the crowd in Adelaide. He did it in Adelaide before. He did it a few times at the Gabba after taking those wickets on the final day. But look, purely, this talent and that performance, but purely when you look at the trajectory where his career and his life's taken in the last 18 or so months, you'd be shocked if he's not in the World Cup squad. You'd be shocked if he doesn't pull off a couple of other remarkable performances whenever he gets his chance in the IPL. And I think in a way he's in a team where they have a lot of batting talent. We saw last night as well, just looking at their bowling against Rajasthan. Maybe someone like Shamar Joseph will add that spice to their attack. So before long, we'll see him play. And I'll be very surprised if he's not in the World Cup squad.
See, this is the interesting thing, because Chris Gale, who's doing a lot of promotional work for the World Cup.
I know. I interviewed him as well. Yeah.
Okay. So Universe Boss has said Shamar Joseph should be in the World Cup squad.
Yeah.
And when you look at the bare facts, it's actually crazy to think someone who's only played 2 T20 matches is being talked of as a certified sort of pick for the World Cup. But as you said, it sort of suits the narrative, the trajectory of his career. It almost feels destined that he will be at the World Cup. And I can sort of imagine, I think Lucknow Super Giants play RCB on the 2nd of April. Yeah. First ball to Kohli. We saw what happened to Steve Smith.
It's just going to happen, right? Everything seemed predestined, right? Like I saw him for the first time here in Adelaide. I was on commentary, him playing for West Indies in the warm-up game against CA11. And I don't know, I wasn't on air when he bowled his first over, but I just thought I should record his first ball. Nothing happened. It was just a length delivery outside off stump. But I just thought I should record. I don't know. Something just told me there's something about this kid. I mean, there was a backstory and all of that, as we all know. But you just felt like something's going to happen. And I was fortunate to be on air when he bowled that first delivery to Steve Smith and get him out just after I had given them a 30-second summary of his backstory. It all worked out beautifully. And then again, that day at the Gabba, now, I mean, it's been well publicized how that came about, but you just know he's going to do something special. Like, you're right, getting rid of Kohli of the first ball just seems predestined, like everything else in his life.
And it's kind of weird, since the Gabba, I mean, to throw a wrestling comparison, it's sort of like Jade Cargill, who WWE have signed. With Shamar Joseph, the injuries kept him out of the Dubai IL20, the PSL, and he's not started the IPL yet. It's sort of giving him this aura now. There's a lot of build-up to see him bowl his next ball since the Gabba. So that, again, just sort of adds to this whole narrative of the Shamar Joseph story.
Yeah, and Lucknow have really tapped into it, haven't they? I mean, a lot of their social media content has centered around him. His arrival, that whole clip about the Wi-Fi password and all of that. Again, which has to do with the Gabba. And even I saw a couple of other clips as well about him. So I think they know as well. There's something about, I mean, he's got that aura you mentioned about it. Is he the Goldberg? Is he the Goldberg of our era? Like, it took Goldberg just that one match against Hugh Morris, right? Like on Nitro, and then they were like, "Oh, this guy is something special about him." Though Shamar did much better at the Gabba than Goldberg did against Hugh Morris. Yeah.
So, in terms of, if we look at the wider context of West Indies, I think bowling-wise, strike bowlers are something we struggled with in white ball cricket. We've got Alzari Joseph. He's a lock-in for the World Cup, regardless of what happens in the IPL.
Yeah.
O'Shane Thomas is the other bowler we have. He's someone who, seems to be walking a tightrope at the moment, especially with Sammy saying there are 2 or 3 places up to grabs. Realistically, with our top order settled, our batting order settled, you'd imagine Sammy was referring to the bowling. If you're looking at replacements, Obed McCoy and Shamar Joseph are the 2 obvious replacements. Obed McCoy is not playing in the IPL.
Yeah.
This sort of leaves the door open. I know he played PSL, inconsistent there, but you just feel him missing the IPL is a big blow for his chances. In terms of Shamar Joseph, though, what sort of IPL would he need to have? As you said, is it just a case of him performing okay, as in showing up consistently in matches, or will he still have to deliver standout performances? Bearing in mind this is his first franchise tournament, is there still some sort of pressure on him to perform, knowing that he kind of can make the World Cup squad?
Purely in an IPL context, I've seen a lot of cricketers. We all have who like made big news and like with their signing for a franchise or with their arrival, and them just falling by the wayside. Right? We've seen it, and cricketers from around the world. I mean, not so much Indian cricketers because it's different in their context, but I mean, go back in time. I remember when Richard Levy made what was then the fastest T20I century or so, 10 years ago or so, I remember, for South Africa, immediately roped in by the Mumbai Indians, and he played a handful of games, and they were like, oh, maybe not. And it didn't work out for him. And similarly, there have been so many cases. I mean, think back to 2, 3 years ago when both Jai Richardson and Riley Meredith went for a lot of money. And I think 3 or 4 games into their IPL seasons, their franchises went like, oh, this maybe we made a mistake here. So it can happen, like, that, and I speak purely from an IPL context. So whatever Shamar Joseph does here, like, yes, I mean, whatever he's done so far to bring him here is wonderful, and we can see that they are promoting him a lot. But I mean, he's already seems like a main eventer, right? But he'll still need a couple of strong performances, and also it depend on how well his team goes, because don't forget, next year is the big auction. And right now, I mean, if you are Shamar Joseph, you're thinking about the big auction in 2 ways. Have a really good tournament, and sort of, if you don't get retained, then you can go for a lot of money next year, right? That's one way of looking at it. Or like, have a decent enough tournament and make an IPL level impression, so that you don't kind of just fall by the wayside and you're still in the reckoning. But if you are Darren Sammy, if you are the West Indies, you already know what potential he has, not just with the ball. We saw what he can do with the bat as well, albeit in another format. I mean, you always judge number 11 runs. Like, you can't suddenly think of him as an all-rounder, right? Yeah. So, but at the same time, he's shown that he can do that. And he's shown that he's got that thing about him, right? He just, people like Shamar Joseph just don't rock up and produce that kind of, epoch-defining performance like he did at the Gabba. And we keep going back to it because that's really the context of Shamar Joseph kind of goes back to that performance. Right? Everything that's happened in his life since happens because of that. If the doctor doesn't give him the pill, if he doesn't get onto the field that morning, we wouldn't be speaking about him right now. And I would be surprised if he would be with Lucknow currently, right? So I think, but if you are Darren Sammy, even if you see sparks of what he can do in T20 cricket, because the spirit and the fire he has in his belly, but you don't know, like you said, how he goes in white ball cricket in different situations, right? With the new ball, under pressure, and the depth. Even if he gives them 2 performances of note, right, where he defends the total, or that he kind of withstands that pressure and puts off, takes some crucial wickets, I think that'll be enough to convince Darren Sammy, because you're right, West Indies need that kind of extra zip. They have Alzari, but if you can add Sharma to the mix, you have wicket-taking potential. Like Obed McCoy, I was a big fan of, but his career seems to have kind of nosedived to an extent. Injuries haven't helped because he was a shoe-in, wasn't he, for the last 2 T20 World Cups? And I think he missed out on both because of injury. But a different kind of bowler, right? More than a James Faulkner. To quote like someone, that's a throwback. It's like James, especially for a West Indian audience. So he's more like he change of pace and all of that. But I mean, he can still find a place in that bowling attack. But if you have the 2 Josephs operating as wicket takers with the new ball and the old ball, I think it works. So all Sharma needs to do is 1 or 2 performances and he's in.
Yeah, I think West Indians can credit a large part of our 2016 win to James Faulkner and the comments he made before. But Barat, one sort of cemented main eventer, also at Lucknow, Nicholas Pooran.
Yeah.
Big money, 1.9 million US dollars, I think he went for. He's played 64 41 balls in his first innings. Before the show, you said you were watching the highlights.
Yeah.
Sort of this innings in isolation, and sort of what do you make of Pooran? Sort of where is his game at this point in time?
I think from what I've seen of Nicholas Pooran over the years, he's batting well when he's hitting balls over the offside. Because his strength has always been like a lot of left-handers in T20 cricket. Just clearing his front leg and hitting balls over mid-wicket and deep backward square leg, or even kind of playing the lap sweep of fast bowlers. But when Nicholas Pooran is hitting through the offside or hitting over the offside, that's when you know his game is in perfect order. And I saw him do that in Adelaide as well. I mean, he hit 3 or 4 sixes very early on in that massive run chase they had. And then he got out to Spencer Johnson, the short ball kind of like, climbing at him. But I would be surprised if any of those West Indian pitches are going to, or I don't know whether the West Indies even play in the US, so that doesn't matter. So any of those Caribbean pitches are going to give that kind of extra bounce to any of the bowlers for Nick, because that's something that has followed him around, hasn't it? That big short ball where he can't help himself and he does get out playing that shot a lot. He gets success as well playing that shot. But with that not being the case, I think we could finally see the Nicholas Pooran at a world level, which we've always wanted to see. I mean, he'll be the first one to admit that he's never really had a big World Cup, has he? He's played a handful, like 2 or 3 by now, but he's never really, made an impression at that level. And he's done it all around the world now. After that one blip of an IPL season 2 years ago, I think he's really rediscovered his IPL touch, if you want to call it that. But even his innings last night against a pretty decent bowling attack, you saw he was backing himself to, when he backs himself to give, or when he gives himself room and backs himself to clear the offside. There was that 160 hit or backput point. That tells me that his game is in order. And maybe it is finally time for him to kind of prove to the world what West Indians and maybe IPL or T20 franchises around, the T10 franchises and all other formats have seen in him.
Yeah, I think with Pooran, in the World Cups, 2021 was always going to be tough for him because you're sort of in the shadows when you've got Chris Gayle, DJ Bravo, Pollard in that team. 2022, I mean, we saw with captaincy, some players are burdened by captaincy. I think Pooran was a good example.
Yeah, totally.
This is essentially a World Cup where he's sort of free of the shackles and he can kind of show what he's made of. Just out of interest, obviously Lucknow played him at number 6, which is lower down than we normally see Pooran. Do you sort of see that as his strength coming in as almost finisher, or do you think they should really start moving him up based on sort of the repertoire of shots and the way you can build an innings around it? How would you sort of position him in this side?
I mean, it could be maybe some might not agree with me, but he's the left-handed Glenn Maxwell, isn't he? In many ways, and what we've seen with Glenn Maxwell in T20 cricket in particular is different in one-day cricket. I think Maxi prefers that 6-7 role, or the number 7 role. He's really made his own. But for in T20 cricket, the number 4 position has been perfect for him, because the number 4 is like a number 4 in T20 cricket in most cases is like the number 6, isn't it? So I mean, if your top 3 can give you a bit of a platform, and even if you say walk out to bat somewhere between the 7th and the 10th over, a Pooran who does like to give himself a couple of balls. I mean, he can hit the first 3 balls to 6 if he wants to, like he did in Adelaide, but you want someone like Pooran to just give himself 4 or 5 balls to get in. And the only criticism I've ever had of Nicholas Pooran is at times he can look over eager, right? Over anxious to really impose himself. But if you bat, and which at number 6, I guess he has no option but to do. I mean, yesterday I think they lost those 3 quick wickets. Maybe the thought was with Bolt really swinging it the way he was, you maybe wanted to not protect him, but keep him slightly lower down, looking at the Rajasthan bowling attack as well. So maybe it was tactical yesterday, but I do see him batting higher up. And for the West Indies, obviously, you want him in the top 4, in my opinion, and at number 4, to be precise.
Yeah, I mean, when I interviewed him a few years ago, after he had that dreadful IPL season for Punjab, where he averaged like 9.95, he did talk about flexibility, like he's happy to play in any position. But interestingly enough, he also mentioned how T10 cricket has affected his game. Just T10 cricket in Trinidad is really strange. I mean, I think it's broadcast on Fancode in India, even though it's like small competition. But he said T10 cricket, you essentially have to learn how to swing from the off. Like you don't have time to, and that sort of helped his game in terms of adding that sort of more demolition style batting that we've seen, especially today. So that's something which is added to his game. Obviously, Lucknow Super Giants also have Carl Mayers in the side. Yeah, it's hard to see Mayers getting into the first 11 unless De Kock really declines as opener and sort of leaves an opening. Where do you sort of stand on that?
Yeah, I mean, the only way I can see him come in is say if they bowl first and he comes in as the impact player. But just to get into the playing 11 at the moment, like even though he was pretty successful for them last year, and he gave them some really good starts, but But yeah, I mean, him playing ahead of Quinton de Kock is a challenge. And also, just speaking of that whole Quinton de Kock thing, it must be difficult being a wicket keeper these days, right? Like yesterday, or a lot of these IPL games I've seen so far, so many wicket keepers on the boundary. Nicholas Pooran being a great example. I thought he was excellent in the field yesterday. He think kept a lot of 3s to 2s. He was pretty rapid around the boundary, so that was good to see. But then from a Rajasthan perspective, or Dhruv Jurel taking 2 catches in the deep and the ball following him. And similarly, right? So the reason I mentioned that is maybe back in the day, you could have seen a situation where Quinton de Kock is playing purely as a keeper, where another domestic keeper comes in, and then Kyle Mayers comes in as an overseas batter, which we've seen happen back in the past, because it's no longer a specialist position. Like there are so many keepers on the outfield. Mayers might have to wait a while to break in, and de Kock is not going anywhere anyway, so he's retired from every format except T20I, if I'm not mistaken. So.
Yeah.
Again, that's another thing so difficult to keep a track on. Like who's retired from what, who knows? Like I have no idea anymore. So yeah, I think Mayers will have to wait his turn. So yeah, but I do see him come in. Like he has a fixed role with the West Indies, though, doesn't he? So I don't think he needs an IPL to prove himself. You would think, unless current form or someone else really breaks through and puts pressure on him. So in that sense, I think his place in that squad is secure, I believe.
Yeah, it's interesting with Mayers. He's sort of him, Brandon King and Johnson Charles have been rotated at the top of the order. Charles and King aren't in the IPL. So again, there's no pressure. And Mayers has the addition, the fact he can bowl as well. He kind of adds that dynamic side. So I don't think his place is under threat stuff. But it would be good from a West Indian perspective to see him get time into the IPL. Just a final note on Lucknow Super Giants. If the social media team was really savvy, surely there's got to be some comedy skits filmed between Justin Langer and Shamar Joseph, because I just feel those two characters together would create some genius comedy.
I mean, they've tried it with that whole Wi-Fi password thing. I don't know if you've seen it or not. The Tuta hai Gabaka Gaman. So for the audiences in West Indies who don't understand Hindi, though basically that goes back to the Gabba win that India produced, like when they ended the streak, the Undertaker streak at the Gabba in 2021, that famous series where Rishabh Pant played that innings, and the Gabba ka Gaman. Gaman means what's the translation? I don't think it's pride, but my Hindi is not the best. But yeah, I mean, you take this extra pride in the fact that you hadn't been defeated at the Gabba. So they had that thing, the chip on their shoulder, the Australians, that they don't lose at the Gabba. And Tuta hai Gabba ka Gaman means, Tuta means it's broken. So basically the streak is broken, if you translate it directly. So that's what Vivek Razdan, former India cricketer turned Hindi commentator, famously said on commentary when Rishabh Pant hits that winning boundary or the winning shot. And that just become I think every time anybody speaks of the Gabba in India, they say Tutai Gabba ka Gaman, because Shamar Joseph did the same at the Gabba. So that's what that Wi-Fi password is. And then they have Justin Langer reacting to it because he was the coach, wasn't he, of Australia when the Gabba ka Gaman was broken. So I think they've started doing that, the Shamar Joseph, Justin Langer kind of skits. I don't know if is it like a Booker T?
Goldust.
Yeah, well, Justin Langer as Goldust would be funny, but that would be quite the reinvention.
Yeah, maybe not Goldust, but I can imagine some sort of golden skits planned coming up soon for that. Let's move on now, because I know I told you before we'll probably do 30 minutes. We spent 30 minutes basically talking about one franchise.
Oh, you bring me on your show, you think we'll even get past point one in 30 minutes?
So I'm going to move on to Rajasthan Royals. Now, it was an interesting one yesterday. Rothman Powell didn't play. Shimron Hetmyer played. I thought it'd be the other way around. Hetmyer came in, scored 5 of 7. Hetmyer is someone who's going to be using this IPL to try and get into that World Cup side. He's obviously been dropped from the West Indies side. Lack of consistency. Fans in the region aren't happy with Hetmyer just because there seems to be a general disinterest in sort of Hetmyer, his body language, his performances for West Indies. However, he's sort of like Ted DiBiase at the moment. He's made a Hetmyer big chain. He's given himself main event presence. What does Hetmyer... Do you think Hetmyer can make the World Cup squad? Because he's Shimmer on Hetmyer, if he has a good IPL, he'll get thrown into that squad. Or do you think it's too little too late for him at this point?
I think with Shimmer and Hetmyer, it has so much to do with how he is than what he does. From a West Indian perspective, purely. Because he's really won over the Rajasthan Royals. He's become a pretty... He cemented himself. He's part of the core in that side with the likes of Sanju and Ashwin and everybody else. I wasn't surprised that he played ahead of Rauman because he's their first pick. I mean, he's part of that core, like I said. I mean, they have paid a lot of money for Rauman, so it's not bad being Rauman right now. But just missing an odd game, I don't think is going to affect him too much. But I think even if Shimron Hetmyer has a great IPL, right, it didn't start too well. Firstly, he gets out cheaply, and also I was just intrigued by his body language yesterday. I tweeted out, I took pictures of his expressions, and I said, and I was reminded of the day I got caught smoking finally by my mother many years ago. Like, when she asked me if you do smoke, because I was clearly smelling of cigarette smoke, I said, no, just like Shimron Hetmyer. No, not at all. No, of course not. Like, yeah. And then the DRS was taken by my mother, and then it was proven that there was a big snake. It wasn't just a little snake; it was a big snake. And I did go just like Shimron Hetmyer did yesterday. That was my expression. I think weirdly enough, because he seems so much more comfortable against pace bowling when the ball's coming on. And I've seen in the last few IPLs, teams use spin against him, especially someone like Bishnoi is ideal, right? Slightly quickish leg spin bowls the googly. And just the way he got out yesterday, he was beaten by the googly a couple of times, and he just poked at one and he got out. I think we'll see a lot of that in the West Indies during the T20 World Cup. So that's just the cricket side of it. So even if he does have a very strong IPL, I mean, you have to look at who is his competition in that West Indian lineup, right? There are quite a few. I mean, speaking of Rauman, he's one of them, and he's captain. So, Rauman will bat in that number 5, number 6 role. And obviously Rauman bowls as well. Hetmyer in the field, we didn't get to see him field. He was substituted right away. I saw you tweet about that. So it's intriguing. I think I was there in 2018, Santokie, when he made those runs in Test cricket, and he had that incredible one-day series against India. This is just before I left India. And we all thought, wow. I mean, I know at that point, Nicholas Pooran had already been spoken of as the next big thing of West Indian batting. But you saw Hetmyer, and you're like, wow, where's this kid been? He is the next big thing. He'll play all formats. And then, I don't know, his career has gone somewhere else. And while he's beloved in the IPL, I'm not so confident that even if he has a dream IPL, he scores 600, 700 runs, that Darren Sammy will, he might still get into the squad, but I don't think that will be enough for him to just cement himself or get his place back. I think he'll have to convince West Indies and Darren Sammy that he's fully committed beyond just wanting to play in a World Cup, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think with Hetmyer, part of it is off-field, trying to show that commitment. We know the potential he has based on quality. He should be a guaranteed starter if he fulfilled his potential. It's just that commitment. And I don't know if he's got enough time to sort of make anyone change their mind about him. So it's a shame from a West Indian perspective, but you can only go by performances on the field at the end of the day if you're Darren Sammy. But one person who's in competition with Hetmyer in that middle order, Shai Hope. Now, Shai Hope, in terms of global cricket, I would say he's the closest West Indies have to a sort of Daniel Bryan character in terms of I've never known a player have so much goodwill behind him. Players, fans, whatever we tweet, fans will say Shai Hope is the match winner. Shai Hope should be back in Test cricket. Shai Hope should be in the T20 World Cup. So Shai Hope's a very interesting one. Where do you stand on Hope? I was surprised he played at number 3 for Delhi Capitals yesterday, just because of the low fee he had and sort of it wasn't a high profile signing for them. I thought he'd be a bench player. However, they've got him in. He played a classic Shai Hope innings. I think he scored. What did he score in the end? It was 33 of 25.
Yeah.
Played some lovely shots. He hit a beautiful 6 off of Abada and then got out the next ball. That's sort of where you stand with Shai Hope. I don't know if, from a modern T20 point of view, I don't know if the quote unquote anchor role that he plays is geared towards the modern cricket. Where do you sort of stand on Hope and sort of the skill set he brings to the format?
I just couldn't get my head around his role in the side during the T20 series in Australia last month or a couple of months ago, because they kept sending him in at like 5-6 and in big run chases where he just couldn't. Yeah, I mean he would hit the odd boundary, but that's not his game. And he you could see it was almost like watching Steve Smith bat at number 5 or number 6, which is why eventually. I mean, look, Steve Smith doesn't have an IPL role, a gig. I mean, except he's doing commentary for the first 2 weeks. But I mean, we digress like I always do. I was also kind of intrigued. You speak about the like where the IPL stands. Steve Smith's commentary debut or studio debut, there he stood with a lot of former and current Indian players, all of them speaking in Hindi, and poor Steve's just standing there and nodding away. And I don't know whether you've seen, I mean, we speak of social media. I don't know whether you've seen what Star Sports are doing. So they're getting Steve Smith and these guys to talk about technique and all of that. And they're getting voiceover artists who kind of sound like Steve Smith speaking in Hindi, and even Pat Cummins for them. You have to see these clips. If you haven't watched them, they're all over social media. It's quite something. The first time especially for someone like me who have spent so many years talking to Steve Smith, getting to know him, the first time you hear that clip, you're like, wow, did Steve Smith just learn Hindi? But then you just realize it's a voiceover artist. But anyway, so that's the only gig Steve Smith has in this IPL. So he has no chance to prove his sort of credentials at the top of the order. But that happened 18 months ago or so when they said, look, if Steve has to continue playing T20I cricket, the only place is at the top of the order. I think similarly with Shai Hope. I mean, he's such a classy player. Like you said, Daniel Bryan, everybody wants him in every side. I mean, during the 2 test match series here, people couldn't believe that he wasn't here playing test cricket. And then he just rocks up for the T20I series, which is even weirder. I mean, it's almost like, I mean, a wrestler you want to see, fight for the world title, suddenly seeing him in the Andre the Giant Battle Royale with some random mid-carders. That's what it felt like. And he just looked out of place, with his batting style. I was surprised, this is his first IPL deal, isn't it? Or was he? Yeah, it is. Yeah. And he's been around IPL auction lists many, many times. I've seen his name going unsold quite often. So I don't know and I guess it's also the whole IPL, CPL mix, right? That also plays a big role in him getting picked and them the scouts having noticed something. But like Delhi have shown, I mean, if there is a place for him, it has to be at the top of the order. If he's not fitting in your top 3, I just can't see him, especially if you're chasing big totals. Right, it does become a challenge unless you're hoping that, or you're picking Shai Hope at number 5 or 6 just for the 3 for 20 or 4 for 30 scenario, which I don't think is a very good way of going about it. But look, it's nobody thought of him as a T20I cricketer till now, but he's really backed himself. We'll see. He had a good CPL, didn't he, last year or the last 2 CPLs? So yeah, but I'm not convinced at the moment.
Yeah, he was the leading run scorer for Guyana Amazon Warriors in CPL. So that sort of catapulted him into the spotlight in T20 cricket. But it's interesting because he got called up for the Australia series, but decided to play in the Bangladesh Premier League at the same time. So from his point of view, he's obviously thinking this World Cup is, his priority. But again, he hasn't played much first-class cricket either, but people are calling him for being a test squad. So there's a lot of goodwill behind him. And I did see, since we're talking about social media vignettes throughout this episode, there was one, I don't know if you saw Shai Hope and Tristan Stubbs. They greeted each other and they spoke in Hindi to each other. And I could just see both of the players thinking in their head, do this for the money, because they didn't know what they did. There was no voiceover artist. I'm not sure if they knew what they were saying, but they were reading off the script. So.
I mean, I do worry though. I hope they have managers and people around them telling them what. It's an alien language, right? They better know what they're saying.
So Hope's an interesting one because on one hand, you can see in West Indies side, he sort of brings that stability that could allow a Powell or a Pooran to sort of tee off. But at the same time, if you're playing Australia and you're chasing 220, has Hope really got a place in that side? Can he accelerate? Which is the big question mark I have. But again, he sort of locked down his place in that top order at number 4 for West Indies. So I can see him making that World Cup 11 for the group stages. But again, I do have concerns about whether he can accelerate and adapt for all scenarios in T20 cricket, like a Pooran can, for instance.
No, true.
Okay, and so the next franchise we're going to go to now, this will be a good one to talk about. So Calcutta Knight Riders now, there's only one player we can start with, Dre Russ himself. He said, after getting back into the West Indies side, he said this time he's going to train like a UFC fighter, get ready for that T20 World Cup. He's definitely started with a bang, 64 off 25, man. What do you make of Dre Russ? Like his ability in T20 cricket as a finisher?
Oh, yeah. I mean, he's just, this is what I would say is third coming as a T20 great, isn't it? Or like he's already a T20 great, but he's got that look in his eye, doesn't he? I saw him even in those 3 T20s here. In a couple of games, he did start firing, and then it didn't really kick on. But just when he gets to his 50 and the way he just kind of doffed his cap or whatever, just kind of raised his bat and pointed it towards. It looked like Shah Rukh Khan because, it's India, and the camera immediately panned to Shah Rukh Khan. So maybe it was to him saying, thank you for sticking with me for so many years, because he did have a few lean years with KKR, right? But they've never turned their back on him. They've always really, I mean, they've been loyal to each other, Dre Russ and KKR. And he just seems to have that bit in between his teeth, like his strike rate's 227. I saw somewhere this year in T20 cricket. And I was almost tempted to tweet that after that KKR innings 2 nights ago, that I can almost see him doing a Carlos in that World Cup, like winning West Indies the World Cup single-handedly, because he can still do that. I mean, you're talking once again, like we spoke with Pooran, pitches where the ball kind of like comes at the right height for Dre Russ, and that's his strength. And when you think of this World Cup, it's a pity that we're talking about this great era of West Indies T20 cricket, which we've seen in the last 15 years. They've never played a World Cup at home, right? Like the last time we had a T20 World Cup in 2010, Dre Russ was just coming through the ranks. You still had Gale and a couple of others, but a lot of these guys haven't got that opportunity. So it will be a big event for them in that sense, like to get to do that on pitches which now they're so used to playing on in a T20 context with CPL and everything else. But Dre Russ just seems to, this could be pretty much seeing the last chapter of Andre Russell's international career. I mean, this has to be his last return, but even probably his T20 career as well, right? He looks like he's always looked like a UFC fighter. But just the fact that, he's never smiled a lot, but the fact that he never smiles anymore, I would be very scared if I was his opponent. And I think he's going to have a strong IPL. He's already started well. And with Dre Russ, that's the thing, right? His bowling is so effective. I can't think of too many Andre Russell spells for West Indies where he doesn't give you a wicket or two. No, the team will kind of revolve around him, you'd expect when they get to that T20 World Cup.
Yeah, I think with Dre Russ, his power hitting as a finisher is so destructive. You almost forget that he can contribute with the ball as well.
Yeah.
Like he's got those all-round capabilities. And it's interesting from a West Indian perspective. The relationship between IPL and West Indian players is interesting because if you look at like a Gale and even now Pollard, Bravo, Russell, Narine, they've had issues with the board. They've been in and out of the West Indies sides, whereas IPL's been the one constant for them. In the case of like Pollard, 10, 12 years in the IPL. So for them, their relationship with IPL franchises is going to be stronger than it would be with the West Indies Cricket Board, for instance.
Oh, very much so. And you speak about them having issues with the board and then those relationships completely falling out. With Andre Russell, it's not always been hunky-dory with KKR, right? There was this whole period 2-3 years ago, I remember, when there was a lot of talk behind the scenes of, is he done with KKR? There were a couple of comments from both parties where I don't know whether it was about his role in the side or what it was. There was some issues, but he stuck with them and they stuck with him. And look where they are right now. I mean, he's the heart and soul of that team. I mean, Sunil Narayan's just personality-wise, he's never going to be the heart and soul of anything. But like, he's the spirit of the side, if you want to call him that. But Andre Russell is that guy. And you're so right. I mean, even the other day when I was interviewing Chris Gayle, it was a classic Chris Gayle. And I've known Chris for a long time. So it was kind of, we just started talking shit. And then at some point I realized I have to start interviewing him. And I said, okay, let's start interviewing. You should read it. It's just like, it's okay. It's a fun interview, to say the least. Like, yeah. So, but even in that, like the way he speaks about Virat Kohli or Sachin Tendulkar, I find it intriguing. Like, because they've spent more time with these guys than in the West Indian team, right? Like, I mean, Chris Gayle would play for West Indies and go away and spend long periods of time with the IPL franchise, and I've seen them around the IPL as well. I mean, they played such a big role in making the IPL what it is today. I mean, they've added such flavor and such, I mean, in many ways, from a West Indian perspective, you'd be surprised I use the word, but professionalism to the league as well, right? Like, by being there, like, they always show up for the IPL, don't they? So I'm not surprised that relationship is so strong, that bond is so strong. And now with IPL franchises owning teams everywhere else as well, if anything, that relationship has just grown. It's no longer just a 2-month fling that they have. It's a proper half the year around the world affair, if you want to call it that.
Yeah, and for instance, when Dravas was having issues with the Jamaica Tallawahs and the owners,
yes.
He called it the weirdest franchise he's ever played for. It was the Trinbago Knight Riders, the Knight Riders who swept in and kind of saved him by giving him a deal. So again, that sort of family love there in the franchises. Yeah. It contradicts sort of the relationship he may have with West Indies cricket, which is interesting. And going on, let's talk about Sunil Narine, because he's someone, when his action was getting questioned and when he was getting sanctioned, it was KKR who helped him through the rehab and were there to support him. And it's very telling for me that he's retired from international cricket, but he still he plays for Kolkata Knight Riders and Trinbago Knight Riders. And we saw in the first game, I don't think he conceded a boundary in his spell. No. He opened as well. He's back to opening. I didn't think we'd see pinch hit in Narine. It didn't come off, but it will at some point.
Yeah.
So Narine's someone who's been a constant in the side, constantly evolving his game. And again, similar to Dravas, his affinities will be with the Knight Riders, probably ahead of West Indies, bearing in mind the amount of what the commitment they've made to him, sort of how they've supported him in contrast to the West Indies.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it changed his life. I remember years ago in 2013, doing a story on him in Trinidad. I tracked down his dad, his late father, I think quite dramatically, went to Arima. I thought it was a suburb. Turns out it's a massive town. Then I just drove around asking people if they knew where Sunil Narine lived. And I just randomly bumped into a guy who had bought a van from Sunil Narayan's father, and he just like pointed me to someone's house, and it was just weird. Like, and I ended up in their house, and they're lovely people, the Narayans, and his dad and his mom took care of me, and my wife was with me as well. Well, that was part of our honeymoon, but anyway, that's a story for another day. So, and I remember his dad talking about how much. This is back then, like how much the IPL and KKR meant to the family, because it allowed him to buy a house and like completely transformed the way they all looked at life. And he's always stuck with them. You're right. I mean, there was a point where it felt like the West Indies had turned their back on him with the bowling action. It was KKR who bailed him out or who stood by him. And, even at times, and when he came back, like a lot of bowlers in the history of the game, with a changed bowling action, you were like, oh, will he be effective? Could he be the same Sunil Narine? And even if it took a while for him to get back to being that Sunil Narine, they stuck with him. And they gave him that new role, right? Like, they were the ones who started opening the batting with him. Chris Lynn and Sunil Narine became a thing a few years ago. And it doesn't always pay off. I think maybe it pays off one in 7 or 8 matches. But they take it. They're fine with it. They keep sticking with it. It's quite comical, this run out. Like, I mean, I've seen batters give up, but it's funny how early he gave up. Like, yes, he had run a fair way down the pitch, but then he saw the fielder pick up the ball and he just stopped. It's like, okay, here you go. So even if it wasn't a direct hit, he would have been run out. So that was quite funny. But yeah, and yeah, I think he's going to spend the rest of his life playing for the Knight Riders. We know in India and in the Caribbean and wherever else it takes him.
Do you think Narine's on-field, his lack of emotion and his sort of steeliness has become his gimmick? He's almost like a Gunther guy at the moment. Like that is his gimmick. He doesn't show emotion on the field.
Yeah, I mean, no emotion, no promos, right? Like, it's, I mean, you see him occasionally at press conferences and stuff. He gives you nothing, just a couple of words here and there. But yeah, to the extent they almost like, I wouldn't be surprised tomorrow if he's doing a press conference and a manager walks out with him, a Jim Cornette or Bobby Heenan to do his promos for him. He's one of those amazing cricketers, right? We speak of personality and all of that. Yeah. I mean, in many ways, that is his personality. Comes in, clocks in, bowls 4 overs, doesn't concede too many boundaries, doesn't run through sides like he used to back in the day, and then opens the batting, plays 15, 20 balls occasionally, and then you don't even see him around the field. You don't even know where he is most times. So yeah, I think that's become his gimmick, his personality.
I think you've identified a future job for yourself as the Jim Cornette of IPL, just walking around offices with a tennis racket.
Yeah, right. So the broadcaster walks towards a player for an interview, and I walk in and I say, "I speak for my client."
But I wonder if we are it's probably inadvertently we are seeing IPL becoming more in terms of like a soap opera kind of thing, similar to wrestling gimmicks. So I wonder if we will see it in the future 5 years potentially, where players are dropping promos insulting other franchises or saying we're coming for you and that kind of thing, building up, because there does seem to be that sort of theatrics that have been added to the IPL in recent years.
Oh, I would be disappointed if that doesn't happen. And you're right. I mean, last year's IPL, I kept referring to it as the attitude era of the IPL, because you had all these close finishes. You didn't know how there was, I think, a 2.5 week period where it felt like every match ended up, if not in the last, if not of the last ball, then in the last over. And, the Rinku Singhs and those guys were just coming of age. And it felt a lot like the attitude era, right? Like the cliffhanger ending. You didn't know how it was going to, you didn't know who was going to run out. Billy Gunn did famously, as we mentioned earlier. So it's heading that way. And I was seriously intrigued by that Justin Langer, and I tweeted it out immediately. Justin Langer doing that video for Lucknow before the first game, where he said, "Today we are playing a practice game today. It's free entry. Please come. And there's a special thing that's going to happen at the end. KL Rahul, your captain, is going to show up in person." Like, that's classic 1980s, right? Yeah. When the TV was basically in wrestling used just to bring people into the crowds. Now TV is the be-all and end-all, or broadcast is. But back in the day, TV shows were never there to for the big matches. They were there to promote the live shows, which is what it felt like. It was an old 1980s promo.
You've just got Justin Langer standing in front of the cameras for an hour doing the same promo with different cities, different Indian cities.
Very much.
But yeah, no, I mean, even dating back to the IPL, Gambhir, Kohli, that argument they had on field felt like Austin Rock, my way or the highway promo kind of thing. We've had sometimes it turns towards a shoot. Mitchell Stark, Kyron Pollard a few years ago, where the bat got thrown in the air. So it has always had potential for theatrics.
Oh yeah, and Kohli Gambhir is like in an all-time rivalry, right? It's all it's still a thing, right? Like last year we saw the whole scenes when he was with Lucknow, and him and Naveen ul Haq and Virat Kohli getting into it, and then Gautam Gambhir getting into it. So it's a long-standing rivalry. It added to the whole attitude era thing I mentioned last year, and it has to head there, right? I mean, even if we don't see those kind of antagonistic promos, there will be times when I think we'll see and gimmicks have become a thing. I mean, you look at Rajasthan Royals and some of these other franchises, they've started giving gimmick names to their players. Like Chennai Super Kings have done it. They've been doing it for years now. I mean, they use Tamil gimmicks, which even I can't relate to most times, even though I'm originally from there, where they have a nickname for all their players, whether they're Indian or not. And when they speak amongst each other, they only use those names. So we are headed in that direction. And for people like you and me, that's exciting.
Definitely. So we've talked about 8 West Indians so far. Alzarri Joseph, we kind of mentioned at RCB. I don't think there's too much to discuss with Joseph. We sort of know what we're getting. He'll perform well over the course. He didn't have a great first game for RCB. Went wicketless, but we know over the course of the season, we know Alzarri Joseph will come to the forefront. Shafane, rather third again at KKR. I know the talent Shafane has, but I just can't see him becoming a regular in that KKR side. I don't know if they sort of have a spot for him. And the final one is Romario Shepherd, who I really like. Inconsistent, but he's got that X factor when he does perform. What have you made of Romario Shepherd? Because he does get criticised for giving away a lot of runs at the death, but at the same time, he has got something about him, I think.
He does. Even watching him during the T20 series here in Australia, that I keep referring back to, there were times he would bowl an over where he's gone for a lot of runs, but the next over he just has this energy about him, right? He's just running in ball after ball after ball, and he's got a lot of skills with the ball. You can see he uses the slow ones really well. He's got a decent enough bouncer which comes from nowhere, and he's a wicket-taking bowler. Like if you're just talking purely about his bowling, and obviously then he provides you with that hitting prowess towards the end. I mean, where you'd bat him, what, 8 maybe? 8?
Yeah, 8.
Yeah, 8 or 9 even, like depending on what the rest of the batting order looks like. And he's the kind of the cricketer who is useful in World Cups, right? If he can just like give you those 2-3 overs and then like finish off a couple of games or help you finish off a couple of games. I mean, you look back at the 2 T20 World Cups that West Indies won. I mean, you have the big names who performed really well, but then you also had like not a direct comparison, but you also had like someone playing a specific role like a Samuel Badri or a couple of others as well back in the day. Who's the left arm fast bowler? I keep forgetting his name. The left arm in 2012. I forget his name. No. I mean, no. The left armer. Yeah, from Jamaica, I think. Anyway,
not Sheldon Cottrell.
No. Okay, cut this bit out. Sorry. So anyway, so they've always had like roles, specific roles like that. So I can see him now. How he fits into the Mumbai setup, I'm not very sure. I mean, where he gets in Mumbai are like so. Generally, they don't change the makeup of their playing 11 too often. And now with Gerald Coetzee taking wickets last night for them as well later on. But he's the ideal impact player, right? Like, I mean, depending on, because he can do both, you could see a role for him at some stage in this IPL where he comes in as like, either with the bat or with the ball as an impact player. But him in the starting 11 for Mumbai doesn't really, something has to happen where the makeup changes so much that they're forced to bring him in. But he's a good player to have on the bench, I think, and he might well be a good player to have on the bench for the West Indies as well when they get into the World Cup. Like, do you see him getting into the playing 11 right away? I'm not so sure, but he's a good guy to have in the 15, I would say.
Yeah, you'd have him in the 15 just because of that sort of X factor. So yeah, Romario Shepherd, hopefully we see him get games, but as you said, Mumbai Indians are very, very settled sort of side. So in terms of missing players, was there anyone West Indians who you were sort of surprised to not see at the IPL? I'll throw one name out there, Jason Holder.
Yeah, I know.
He was, ironically, he missed Super 50 while he was at a Rajasthan Royals training camp in October. Yeah. And then he got dropped by Rajasthan Royals. They didn't sign him. And he's someone, as an all-rounder IPL regular, you sort of expected him to get a deal, but he's missed out. He's back to playing 4-day regional cricket for Barbados Royals. So was that a surprise not to see Holder in the IPL for you?
Considering he's wherever he's gone, and he's played for a lot of franchises now, but just from the top of my head, Sunrisers, KKR, Lucknow, he was there, their first mix, and Rajasthan, like you said. He just gives you so much, right? And he also gives you he's captain side so much around the world. He just brings that calmness to dressing rooms, and I thought he did okay for Rajasthan a couple of times, but with Jason Holder, for me, it's always his death bowling. I mean, I know he keeps back. his death bowling is a lot like Tim Southee's death bowling. Yeah. I mean, they keep backing themselves, but rarely does it come off, right? Like, yeah, he pulls it off a couple of times here and there. But, like, his hitting is just improved over the years, right? He's gone from being the tall, elegant right-hander to someone who can clear the fence at will. So, and then the IPL loyalty you talk about. He's always been around, like even if not with the same franchise, like I said. So I was a little surprised to not see him there. I mean, Johnson Charles has had a go here and there, but he's always been an afterthought from the IPL. Like he's the Martin Guptill kind of character. Like, great in international cricket and other leagues, but it's never really found it. Got going in the IPL. Jason Roy, another one. So I think, so that's where you'd put a Johnson Charles in the mix. I can't think of anybody else who really you thought would come in, because most others have had a go at the IPL. I think they've been picked here and there over the years. I mean, among those who you would see in the T20 squad, like Obed McCoy was with Rajasthan for a few years, and he played quite a bit, didn't he? Like, so I can't think of anyone that really jumps out as being someone who I would like to have seen. I mean, I would have loved to have seen Kavem Hodge, just because, not because of his cricket, but he just seems like a character who's made for social media, doesn't he? Like, so I loved Kavem Hodge during the T20 World Cup. There's a Joe Root story, which I can't repeat on air, that he told me without even knowing who I was, which I was quite intrigued by. Maybe I'll tell you that off air, but it's, but not really surprised by anybody else not being there.
I think because of the nature of IPL and the dearth of spinners, I think Gudakesh Moti, someone who, based on quality, should be playing in the IPL, but we know realistically an overseas spinner is going to be very hard.
Yeah, Akil Hussain is a great example, right? I mean, he did get a go, but like, you have to be exceptional as an overseas spinner. I mean, like Adam Zampa, who's ruled himself out this time, but you have to be someone like him who's going to sure shot give you a lot of wickets, or be like Sunil Narine. Like, if you're not those guys, it is difficult to break in.
Yeah. So, Barat, it's been an absolute pleasure. Obviously, you're going to the T20 World Cup. Is that still the plan? So, hopefully we can get you in between the end of the IPL and before the beginning of the World Cup. We'd love to get you back on to sort of build that up. For all cricket fans tuning into this show, thank you and good night. Anyone with a passing interest in wrestling might as well stay on for this bit, because Barat, I did see a promo poster, correct me if I'm wrong, saying you will be announcing at an event in Australia. Is that correct?
I'm making my in-ring debut. That is very correct. I can't believe it's a thing. I really can't believe it's a thing, Santokie, but it's happened. Like, so, well, there is a wrestling convention that's going to happen in Barat in Victoria, just an hour out of Melbourne. It's Starcast, run by Conrad Thompson, who runs some great podcasts in the wrestling world. It also coincides with, and Starcast is generally like that. There's a lot of meet and greets and a lot of former greats, like Bret Hart's going to be there, Shelton Benjamin, Great Khali, Gangrel, like speaking of Attitude Era, and a lot of potential. Or Mickey James is going to be there. Victoria, back in the day, she's going to be there. And many others, and a lot of solid wrestlers who don't have a deal right now with either the WWE or AEW. Some TNA champions are going to be there. So that's happening. But they also have a wrestling event called Australia Stampede, which Bret Hart is presenting. So they have a all women's thing that Mickey James is running called HER, and then the Australia Stampede, which is run by Bret Hart. So I was just planning to go there as a fan to just for some of the meet and greets. And my dear friend Eric Bischoff is coming as well. So I thought, I'll go meet Eric. I've never met him in person. So I was just looking at tickets, and then as I was doing that, I also appeared on Eric Bischoff's podcast, Strictly Business, which is a must listen to if you're a wrestling fan, for the business side of things, before the WWE event in Perth. So I was there as the guest on his show, talking about what it means to Perth, that the WWE are coming and all of that. And then while I'm in New Zealand for the Australia Test, I get an Instagram message from a guy who owns the Oceania Pro Wrestling organization, or the promotion. And turns out he's also the organizer for Starcast in Barat. And he says, "Oh man, I heard you on Eric's podcast. Can I get your email?" I say, "Yeah, sure." So then he emails me and he says, like, "Yeah, can you please come and be part of this?" And like, "I'm a big fan of your work." And I said, "Thank you so much." And then he said, "Oh, but I also have a request. Would you mind being the guest ring announcer in the ring for a 3-on-3 contest where Great Khali is bringing 3 Indian wrestlers from his promotion in India, and there'll be 3 Australian wrestlers, and Eric Bischoff's going to be around as well." So I said, "Yeah, sure. Yeah, I'm really sure." Like, I was ready to buy tickets to come for this event. "Okay, fine. I'll be the guest ring announcer." He's like, "No, we want to promote Australia wrestling." And now he also then tells me that I'm going to be part of an angle. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do. But like, yeah, apart from being a guest ring announcer, tune in, like, stay tuned. I'm gonna be part of an angle. So could there be a heel turn?
Is there a way? Where can we watch it? Is it going to be streamed anywhere?
I'll send you the link. It is going to be streamed. I think you can watch it wherever you are in the world. So this match in particular that I'm the guest ring announcer for, so that's being billed as India v Australia. So 3 Indian wrestlers, 3 Australian wrestlers. And as you know, I mean, last year when I was in India for the Australia Test Series, a lot of Indian cricket fans felt like I turned heel on them when I posted pictures of the pitch preparation in Nagpur. And like, I remember walking around the ground. It was the classic Cena sucks and Cena rules or whatever, chants, because half the crowd was chanting my name in a good, because they like me, I guess. And the other half of the crowd is booing me. So I've already done one heel turn on India. At the moment, I'm sort of representing India in this wrestling bout. But who knows? Can I turn heel on India again? Or will I turn heel on Australia? Maybe that would be a risk with my citizenship application pending, but you never know. You never know.
An angle sounds suspiciously like you might have to take a bump. Have you been practicing?
That's what, so my only concern about turning heel on India is I'll have to, if it comes to that, I'll have to take, I could end up on the receiving end of the Great Khali doing something to me, which I'm a little concerned about. So maybe it'll be for safety's sake, it's better I turn heel on Australia, but we'll see. It'll depend on how brave I feel in the moment.
And would 1997 Barat ever imagine he'd utter the sentence, "My dear friend Eric Bischoff"?
No, I mean, I can't, the more I was telling my wife yesterday, the more I talk about it, the more ridiculously incredible it sounds in my head. The fact that, I talk of Eric Bischoff as being my friend. The fact that Jeff Jarrett's a friend. I went and met him in London on the last day of my trip last year. Because he was doing some promotional work for AEW, or the fact that there is a news item out there in the internet which says Bharat Sundaresan is about to make his in-ring debut, which is, I mean, forget about 1997 Bharat. I don't think February 2024 Bharat could believe that's a thing. So I'm looking forward to it. Though, look, I've never, it's one thing, I've been doing commentary on cricket for years now, but guest ring announcing takes a little more. So I'll have to tap into my, Michael Buffer and see if I can pull off the Get Ready to Rumble.
And what date is this? What date is the
so
event?
It's Saturday, April 13th. It's, I think, Saturday night, Australia time. So it'll be at a good streaming time for you in the UK. I mean, it'll be a pretty late morning on a Saturday, so it should be free. So there you go, India v Australia at the ring.
So that's going to be the real WrestleMania for you coming up then.
Oh yeah, of course. Let's see who turns heel on who, and whether I walk out in one piece or not. So especially with the Great Khali involved and all of that. So speaking of WrestleMania, the one wrestling analogy I forgot to use was on Mumbai Indians. The whole Hardik Pandya coming in and taking over captaincy, that sounds a lot like The Rock in the Bloodline, doesn't it? Rohit Sharma has been the Roman Reigns for so long, so long. Won titles, so many titles for them. And then Hardik Pandya comes in, so he's gone away to Gujarat Titans. He comes in with a contract where it almost is like, well, I'll come back if I'm not saying that's what happened, but it sounds like a very wrestling angle, doesn't it? Like Hardik Pandya comes back and he takes over as captain. So it's a bit of bloodline going on there.
That's a really good analogy. To be honest, if we put our thinking caps on, we probably could have thought about 100 analogies.
Yeah, of course we can.
IPL, we don't want to lose our fan base. So.
That's correct. Yeah. So, please come back. I'll stop talking about wrestling.
But to be fair, you'd be surprised. I'm sure in the comments there are so many cricket fans who love wrestling. There's a big crossover between the two audiences. So those of you who have stayed tuned for the last 10 minutes of me and Barat talking about obscure wrestling in Australia, thank you for tuning in. Hope you have a great night. Barat, always a pleasure to have you on. And as you said, hopefully we'll get you back on at the end of IPL. Michelle will be tagging back in. The trio will be back. It'll be like WCW 3 count. We'll be back together, the three of us.
I just want to be Shane Helms. That's all I want to be.
Barat, thank you very much, and have a good night.
Cheers, brother.
We rule the cricket world. Now the rules.
Welcome to the Caribbean Cricket Podcast, your one-stop shop for all things West Indies cricket. By the fans, for the fans.